Hey everyone, it's Devin Francis, also known as Dr. Blackard.
I'm just a sleepy little baby.
And you're watching episode 226 of the Adventures in Odyssey Oddcast. What were we talking about, Victoria?
Legally Wooten, and I don't remember the name of the other
Value in the
one.
process.
Yes, that is it.
We were talking about the middle two episodes of this album, 74. Um, so, starting with the first one, episode 954, Legally Wooten, written by Jesse Kellum IV, who I assume is the Jesse who is the current intern on staff.
Um, so going into this one, I forgot I was gonna get you to watch a episode of Legal Eagle all about copyright law and intellectual property. I forgot to do that. Last time I watched it was quite a while ago. Very interesting topic, intellectual property. That's what this episode kind of touches on. So basically, there's this party at Wits End, and the theme of the party is around this new popular porpoise character.
Yes.
Um,
Or it's a
and
dolphin, right? It's Jolly
this new
Dolphin.
dolphin character. What's it called again?
Jolly Dolphin.
Yeah. And Wooten basically realizes, like, this is a character he created
Wait,
and
sorry, no, it was Happy. It
scraps.
was.
Yeah.
It was.
Jolly Dolphin is Wooten's.
It's Happy Porpoise. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and Wooten basically realizes that this is the same design and basically, like, mostly just design of a character he created but then scrapped back when his house burned down several albums ago.
Well,
Um,
before decades before.
yeah.
I mean, maybe a decade before when
And
he first came.
he.
When he first moved to Odyssey.
Oh, I thought it was when his house burned down.
No, because the whole point was he lived with Terry when he first moved to Odyssey before he bought
I
his
thought it was
house.
he lived with Terry because his house burned down.
But then the original sketch wouldn't have burned up in his house. Fire.
Yeah, okay, never mind. I was confused. Anyway, he has this friend named Terry who he showed his design to, and Terry was like, it's bad. Don't do the character. And then, coincidentally, Terry is the person who invented Happy Porpoise and is getting like all the residuals and everything. And so Wooten goes to talk to the guy about it when he realizes that like the character sucks and is an awful
It
influence
sucks. It
and
does terrible things like steal from the rich and give to the poor. Terrible villain behavior that will
mm-hmm.
corrupt children, like everyone's most beloathed literary villain, Robin Hood.
and so Wooten's like, I need to get to the bottom of this, and then goes to talk to Terry, and Terry's like a cringe fail loser of a human being. um, and yeah, Terry sucks, honestly. He's supposed to suck. Um, and Wooten basically realizes that, yeah, Terry stole his character and started passing it off as his. And Wooten's like, well, I want to start using this character again like my original version because the only reason I didn't is because you said that no one would like them, but they clearly like the
And he
character.
wants to make sure that
So,
children aren't being taught bad lessons like
yeah.
redistribution of wealth.
Yeah. Um we also get a shout out to like every comic series Wooten's done in this episode at one point. Even the ones we're not allowed talking about anymore because they have copyright stuff.
Yeah, I mean, not
Um,
everyone, but um,
so
we talked about old stuff and
Wooten
the sponge thing.
is Wooten's asked to by Terry to show him the new material he makes with Jolly Dolphin, and Wooton does, and Terry basically throws down a lawsuit against Wooton for stealing from him, and Wooton's like, you stole from me, and Terry says, like, intellectual property, you stole my idea, I'm gonna sue you. And another thing I learned about from Legal Eagle, I highly recommend his YouTube channel, he has a bunch of interesting law stuff, is about court cases versus
arbitration.
What's it called again? Arbitration. So arbitration is crazy expensive, which I'm glad they mentioned in the episode. Also, I think it's neat that we finally got to see like arbitration, considering there's so many court cases in the episodes, but we've never seen arbitration before.
I thought you were going to say that we see the speaking of long forgotten things.
We get
Simon
to see
Jones is there.
Emily's dad, and he is the person in charge of the arbitration.
The arbiter.
He's the arbiter. Which, yeah, I think arbiters are usually judges, so that checks. And what was I thinking of? The entire time I was like, please mention Barrett, please mention Barrett. I know you won't, but like, do it for me. They didn't.
Why would he talk about his kids?
I don't know. I thought he might be like, I have to get back at this time of night to have dinner with my
only child,
Barrett.
Emily Jones.
With my only child, Emily Jones. The other one got lost on vacation, and we haven't seen him since. The other one eloped with Priscilla. Anyway, so Penny and Connie are helping out, as this is the album of Wit Anger. When Wit Anger cannot be present because Wit isn't in the episode, Penny Anger takes over as per the season opening. So this episode has Penny Anger in it. And Penny basically realizes when her and Wooton were starting off like their relationship and getting to know each other and stuff, he made her a little ornament that like was a Jolly Dolphin ornament. And she brings it in as evidence, and then Mr. Jones, Judge Jones, does the thing that I thought they should do immediately, which is just draw the character.
I mean, that's not necessarily proof.
I mean, it wouldn't be proof if it weren't for the fact that Terry said he also did the drawings.
Yeah, but I mean, also drawing from memory, like a speed drawing from memory, isn't like, I don't think that would hold up in court by itself. He did this in addition to.
No, it doesn't matter that it's not in court. It's in arbitration. Arbitration has different rules.
No, I know that.
Court. It's basically like as long as the person who's the arbiter agrees, and the arbiter's opinion basically wins out.
I know. I'm just saying that as
arbitration can be used as evidence in court.
He was providing legal counsel essentially as the arbiter. I don't think he would make a ruling solely based on that. Would be like kind of non-definitive proof, but the fact that he did that,
it doesn't have to be definitive proof if it's arbitration.
I know, but I'm saying I don't.
Arbitration's basically opinion based.
I know it doesn't have to be. I'm saying I don't think Simon would submit his testimony as evidence unless he felt like it was substantial proof, because he's a good judge. Therefore, because it was in addition to other evidence, such as what Penny brought in, which very fortunately happened to be in this extremely specialized ink that was like, it only existed in this period, but also like it clotted in the pens after a period of time, so it couldn't have been like the pen bought and then used later. Like it was only manufactured in this period, but it had to be used within this period. So this drawing must have been created like years ago.
Glass Onion spoilers.
I was going to bring up Glass
Did
Onion.
you think of Glass Onion?
Yes.
in this?
Very obviously, I don't want to talk about spoilers, but there are a lot of similarities in terms of,
We both know what we're talking. If you watch Glass Onion, you know what we mean.
I mean, a number of things. Just the general plot of it being about conflict over copyright, with a very stupid person as the villain.
Yeah, but also like the specific like piece of paper
Yes.
and like whether there's
Original
a copy
drawing,
of it or not.
yeah, fire, and stuff like all. Yeah.
Anyway, so Wooten wins and he starts using the character, but he's like, I will rope Terry in to give him like funds and support and stuff, and we're still friends. And I'll kind of make him, I don't know, like a kind of assistant, like consultation person.
And he turns Happy Porpoise into the Apostle Paul.
Yeah, which was a choice.
As soon as they said the Robin Hood thing at the beginning, I couldn't get that out of my head for the rest of the episode.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, I'm pretty sure there were other things.
They said 3 things, but that was the first one. And so
but that was the first one.
And then the other 2 confused me. I was like, wait, these are bad things now. And then I had to rewind. I was like, oh, I must have heard it backwards. They must have said steal from the poor and give to the rich. And I was like, nope, that wasn't it. It's like, I know I've heard people say before that like some conservatives view Robin Hood as a villain because they're like, he's stealing rich people's hard-earned things just so that poor people can eat. But I was like, man, they were just really, they were like, he's doing this. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And they're like, this is terrible. Look at what he's teaching children. And it was never addressed again. Wooten's like, I need to redeem this character.
I mean, it wasn't just that one thing. Like I said, it was other things too.
Yes, it was stealing.
That was one of the things.
It was that.
Which I did notice.
It was that, not sharing her beach ball and not inviting someone to her birthday party. Which are also really different scales of things. Yeah. These are like 2 like My Little Pony
grand
conflicts.
Larceny, and being slightly rude and
being selfish with your toys, being exclusionary with your birthday party, and then theft.
Yeah. Has there been like a Robin Hood episode before?
No. Although it is funny that literally, I think the day after this came out, I saw someone sharing a headline about a priest in England, in the Anglican Church, I think, who was making the news because he preached a sermon talking about how shoplifting isn't a sin if you're doing it from major corporations. And I was like, that's literally what I'm saying. Like, it's just like the 10 Commandments don't say, don't lie. It says, thou shalt not bear false testimony against thy neighbor. We generally interpret that as lying. It's not entirely the same meaning because there are times that lying is necessary to do good, right? To say that like all taking of something without permission is immoral would condemn Jesus, because even he, think about when they were walking through the field and like picking the grains off to eat, and they tried to condemn him because they're like, it's a Sabbath and you're doing work, you're sinning. And he was like, that is not the spirit of the law or the letter of the law that you're trying to bring up here, but mostly the spirit of the law. And would not only apply in the general case, but in the specific case, because it was also like walking through someone's field and taking it. The idea that poor people,
Your Honor, he was hungry.
Poor people stealing from rich people is deserved, because the biggest source of theft in the United States at least is wage theft by far. And I can't remember exactly what the legal classification of the next one up is, but it's still like a form of labor theft from employers to employees. So, redistribution of wealth. Yes, do steal from the rich. It's morally correct. to do that and give to
I
the poor.
wanted to ask you, how much do you know about arbitration?
Um, Not
Because
much.
I didn't know it was really a thing until this past year.
I don't know all the legal specifics about like how it goes. My assumption was that you're basically paying a judge or someone with legal knowledge to basically do a mock trial wherein they're saying like this is not legally binding in and of itself like a trial, but I'm basically telling you what the outcome of the case would be so that you don't have to take it to trial if you would lose, and so you could settle out of court or drop the suit by finding out that you would lose without having to actually lose a lawsuit in court legally. Is
Yeah,
basically
it's
what my
also
guess
not
was.
always like if you think you're gonna lose. Like the example when I found out about arbitration on Legal Eagle's channel, because he watches a lot of like TV shows and movies and talks about their court stuff, is there's an episode of Always Sunny where the characters find a lottery ticket and they're trying to get an arbiter to tell them like who should get the lottery ticket. So it's basically like getting a third party to sort out your argument,
Mm-hmm.
but like in a very chill, reserved
In a
space
non-formal
and
legal, yeah.
paying out like a ton of money.
Mm-hmm. In that case, it would be so that you wouldn't be sued after the fact later for by someone else claiming they had rights to it.
So,
Um,
yeah, a lot of stuff is interesting. I honestly don't have much to say about this episode. Terry was annoying, but he was supposed to be
they
annoying.
went they
So,
went hard in the paint on the like basement dwelling incel loser vibe
yes.
of like the whole
Yes.
his entire motivation between for the entire thing was just to escape having to live with his mother, and he was like reciting his own motivational tapes that he wrote for himself. And
It was so sad. It was so sad. Um, yeah, it was kind of nice to see Penny and Connie working together to help out Wooten.
Wooten, sorry, we'll go through the rest of the summary and then we'll go through them.
Basically, kind of
Yeah,
did.
I guess so. um, so the episode opens, we're having the two birthday parties at the same time at Wits End, and they are both themed around Happy Porpoise, which is interesting because apparently it's insanely popular, but it's also an extremely local IP, which is weird to think about, right? Like apparently it's not really popular outside of Campbell County, but it's big enough and being published big enough that like kids are having their parties themed around it commonly, which is weird. Like in the era of the internet, that's not something I would expect to happen. But I get why, for the purposes of this episode, that was the case. Immediately, you're like, okay, this is, someone stole Wooten's character. And I was surprised because I just assumed that Wooten would be the defendant in the case in question. I can't imagine why I assumed someone would be suing Wooten. Like, which, I mean, I guess technically he was the defendant, really, in the end.
He was.
Come to think back on it. But it was still like I expected that it was like, oh, Wooten has done something wrong or is being accused of doing something wrong, which is technically what happened, but only because Wooten went first, but didn't want to sue, and then it got flipped back on him.
Yeah. I guess you don't really call them defendants or
Well, I
whatever
mean, also
in
to be fair,
arbitration, though, but
we were led to believe that this would be a court based thing because of the title.
yeah. I mean, it still is the legal system with
Yeah, I
arbitration.
know, but
You're like using judges and stuff. I thought this episode, just because of the title, the Legally Blonde
yes.
reference, would be like Wooten defending someone, like acting as someone's lawyer. And can I just say, I'm really glad that's not what it was. The direction when I realized where it was going, I was like, oh, okay, this is actually interesting to me because I know a little bit about this topic and we haven't really looked at, like I said, intellectual property, owning of ideas, and arbitration in any like law Odyssey episode
I'm
so
also
far.
curious if you could classify it as the title as a Legally Blonde reference in that it's not replacing a name for a name. There's not a lot of similarity between them, and the title Legally Blonde is in and of itself a pun on the phrase legally blind.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it would count as a reference to the phrase legally blind or to legally blonde as a title, because it's not like the title is legally L, because then I would be like, oh, they're changing the names to be Wooten. But since it's not a name, it's like it's probably a reference, but I guess I can't say that like a reference to the movie slash musical title.
Yeah.
But I guess I can't say that for sure, in that it's also
Um,
in and of itself a reference.
Most important part of this episode, which it took all the strength in my bones not to mention in the last episodes we
Was the fact that
reviewed.
they really brought home the important anatomical differences between dolphin and porpoise anatomy.
No, they mentioned Wellington,
Oh, yeah, they did, didn't they?
like by association. It made me crazy. Um, Wooten's when he was talking about Terry for the first time, he's like, it's like he's like the brother, the kind brother I never had, or something like that, which made me lose it. And then I think later, when everything started going down, there was a line, I don't remember who said it, was like, oh, not really the kind brother I never had anymore. And I was like, Wellington would not stand for this. I was like sitting in my car driving, and when I heard like Terry's gonna take Wooten to
He
court,
absolutely
I
would
was just like,
stand for this.
Wellington would not stand for this. If he heard about this, he would like immediately jet to Odyssey, and he'd be like, "You can't do that to a like, you can't do that to a
Oh, I thought you
Bassett."
meant
How
for
dare?
Wooten saying that about Wellington. I was like, Wellington would blanch at the idea of Wooten calling him kind.
Yeah, but yeah, so that made me very happy.
Um, so, yeah, we unlock another piece of Wooten's backstory timeline in terms of his arrival in Odyssey. So now we know Bradford came initially to town in advance, scouted it out to make sure it was a perfect town for Wooten, and then Wooten arrived in town, lived with Terry until Terry and his mother moved to Odenton, at which point Wooten presumably bought the house in which he lived up until the house fire in Thaisabind. So we find out more about the comic, and they're like, yeah, this version is so mean. She's she's like Robin Hood, boo-hoo, classic antagonist of English literature. And that just stuck in my head for the rest of the episode,
I
confusingly. I was
know.
like, surely they have to address this at some point. Um, and then Simon shows up. Very exciting. Um, Made me think a lot of Glass Onion, like we said.
Mm-hmm.
Wooten's speech, uh, where he came back, and I mean, like they said, he was trying to filibuster because they were coming with the ornament, but he opened by trying to say, like, yes, he has the copyright, but that doesn't really matter because the Bible and the U.S. Constitution, which invented freedom and inspired other poor slavery countries like Canada to be free, um, was a weird speech, but he was just trying to stall for time. I thought the mole was going to come into play when Wooten described Jolly Dolphin's appearance at the very beginning of the episode. And he talked about how she had like a mole under a specific eye. And so when they were drawing, I thought that was going to be like the Chekhov's detail that was going to be the smoking gun between their two drawings, was that he had that, or the fact that they're like, see, she really is a porpoise because you drew, or a dolphin because you drew a nose instead of a rostrum. Therefore, it was always supposed to be a dolphin that you changed into a porpoise or something like that. But it was just the fact that he can't draw.
Yeah.
So who drew the
Um,
comics then? Also, by the way,
like, oh, he would have just hired people and then taken credit for their
so why
work
didn't he just claim to be the writing credit then?
because he already claimed to be the writing and drawing credit in
No, but I
arbitration
mean,
and officially on the work. Because he wanted all the credit.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I guess legally you could have entered into a contract with those artists originally to say, like, you know, an Elon Musk style contract with Tesla, where it's like,
You know what, Devin? He could have, but Terry's not smart.
well, yeah, but then they would have sued him already, the artists.
I don't
Unless
know.
he had done that and he was like, I'm going to say this is all me and you're relinquishing all rights to credit that this was you. Um, why do that, though? Why not just say, hey, I created this character and I did the writing, I got someone else to do the art? Then he wouldn't have been in trouble.
I don't know.
Because clearly someone else did draw it, unless he just did
Yeah.
it really painstakingly slowly.
No, he definitely didn't draw it, is the implication.
Because Wooten didn't draw the whole comics. So, anyways,
He
yeah,
traced it.
I liked that, you know, we were able to use Wooten's fire, the house fire, as like a plot thing in that way. And I, you know, we saw, you know, Wooten recognized from the go, like, oh, I could take you to court for this. I'd like to settle this easily and personably. Obviously, Terry basically admitted to Wooten's face, like, yes, I stole it, but legally you can't prove that. And just, you know, very casually and obviously baited Wooten into admitting that he had no tangible proof of the design from earlier until they found the Christmas ornament, which they only remembered at that point when it was brought up because Penny didn't know about the existence of Jolly Dolphin, so she'd received the ornament, but she didn't know what it was. And so it wasn't until something reminded of her later, she was like, oh, that's why I recognize it. It's on that Christmas ornament you drew for me. I didn't know what it was, but now I do, and now we can get it. And very fortunate, like I said, that it was drawn in this extremely specific experimental ink that only existed for 6 months in production, but then like the pens stopped working because the ink hemorrhaged after a certain point inside of the pen. So it's like it could have only been drawn between this window and this window, which was years before. It's also interesting about why Terry waited, like, presumably, I don't know, 15 years or something like
Maybe
that.
he was trying to wait until Wooten forgot. Wooten almost did forget. He didn't realize that
That's true.
it was Jolly Dolphin at first. Maybe if Terry waited one more year,
Maybe.
he would have been in the clear.
Yeah, so that is the episode.
You rate first.
I mean, sorry, I should say, so initially what happened was Wooten, when he goes to talk to Terry and he was like, hey, you took this from me, and he was like, okay, maybe what if I did? You don't have any proof. And he was like, well, I'd like to make Jolly Dolphin content. And he was like, that is fine by me. Send me a copy. And I was like, okay, obviously what's going to happen is he's going to take it and then he's going to publish it before Wooten and
Yeah,
just
that's
change
what I
the
thought at
name.
first too.
But that was not the case.
Nope.
Rather, he was like, wait, you said you were going to make your own thing that was apart from mine, but instead you're taking my thing and transforming it into yours. Literally, in an Apostle Pile style conversion where she literally is like going to Damascus or whatever fish pun they came up with on Damascus, and then
The fish kiss.
yeah, and then is blinded for like 3 days and everything. Very literal translation, and then she changes her name and her species, I guess, in the process.
Yeah, the same thing the Apostle Paul did.
Exactly.
He used to be a cat boy before everything went down.
So he sees that and he was like, no, you're ruining my character. This is defamation of my IP and misrepresentation. Now I'm going to sue you. I've been wearing a wire where I admitted that I stole from you. And I was like,
He's gonna splice it like Jason's recording in Dark Before Dawn.
I like how in that one they were like, originally we created a much better sounding version of that splicing because, we're world-class audio
I
engineers.
think about that all the
But then
time,
you listen to
actually.
it and you couldn't even tell that it was spliced together, and so it wasn't obvious as a plot point because it sounded too good, and
You'll
so we had to
never get
make
away with
and
it.
so we had to
Jason!
so we had to make a much worse sounding one, so it was obvious that it had been cut together.
I love it. I'm getting into too many colleges. I'm too talented with my splicing editing.
Um,
Do I become an amazing singer or an amazing
it's Yeah, it
athlete?
was just funny to me that Wooten is like, you've shown this character to be so immoral. I need to do a full, like, literal, straight out of the Bible Apostle Paul style transformation of this character in order to convert them so that good lessons can be taught to children. Seemed oddly on the nose. I mean, there are some things I'm going to forget because
No, they don't have noses. They have whatever instead.
this is the first episode that Jesse wrote. So, with that,
And can I just say, pretty good for a first episode.
yeah, as far as like, hey, you brought in like an old Wooten thing. There's fun writing with Wooten and with Penny. You made a fun caricature with Terry's patheticness.
You tangentially mentioned Wellington. I don't even know what tangentially means. I don't think I used it correctly. But
You don't know what a tangent is?
I know what a tangent is.
Tangentially is doing something as a tangent.
I don't understand. Let's keep talking about the episode.
Um,
Rate it. Rate it.
so lots of good elements. Um, I am nitpicky about the Robin Hood thing, not just because it's like, oh, it's this little detail I didn't like, but because I feel like it betrays a bigger question about how you view like concepts of morality in fiction. If you're like, this is an evil character behavior that is teaching children bad lessons, which is more of a concern to me in terms of like, a show that is chiefly concerned with doing precisely that. So, on the whole, I'm gonna give it a 4.5.
Oh, wow, that's really high.
Well, that was a little nick, but apart from that, it was an enjoyable episode. I like that I was expecting someone to sue Wooten for something that they thought that he had done.
Mm-hmm.
And then it ended up turning on that where it's like, oh, someone has wronged Wooten actually, but then he didn't sue them and they back sued him essentially for what he would have sued them for or could have sued them
Mm-hmm.
for. A classic like mystery novel style like evidence in the final hour of this thing that has this like Sherlock Holmes deduction level of specificity of it that by deduction clearly means that it must have, it proves the innocence of this person and stuff like that. And with Simon Jones arbitrating it all after he hasn't shown up in a minute.
It was cool that he showed up. I
Like you
I
said,
thought
we
this
even got mention of
episode
Sleuth Family Robinson and Powerboy.
I thought this episode was good. It was cool for all the different things I said before, and lots of things you said. I did think it was a little long-winded in the whole dolphin porpoise debate, which kept on being brought up constantly, and
I thought it was funny as a biologist.
maybe it's because I'm not a biologist. Um, And yeah, I didn't think it was like a bad episode or anything. I just don't know how many times I would want to just re listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna give it, just because I wasn't really like gripped by it or anything, I'm gonna give it a 3, which I don't think is a bad rating. My opinion. I feel bad doing that for the first episode, but like I said, I think it was a very good first episode for this writer.
All right. That is our thoughts on Legally Wooten. Now let's talk about value in the process. All right, now, Value in the Process, episode 955, written by Phil Lawler.
This episode was, for me personally, even though the game night episode was so good, for me this episode was the peak of the album. I don't know about you.
Well, I haven't heard the last 2 episodes.
Like, up to this point.
The second one was Renee. I'd have to think for a moment between this and Game Night. Those would be the 2 for a toss-up.
Like, this episode was everything I wanted from
I would probably say Game Night off the top of my head, more so.
feral, domesticated Suzu and Mori. I wanted...
Emphasis on feral for Mori.
I asked in our Game Night episode, I said, I want Wit and Suzu Mori content. And as has happened so many times with this album, my wishes were heard. The episode came out. We got Wit being their dad. And because Wit is now dad again...
It was the first time that we've actually seen them together interacting since he started looking after them.
Since Wit is dad again, this is our Angry Wit episode once again. And we're back on Angry Wit episodes.
He's like, I can't hear you. I
have
a medical condition. If you're whining, I can't hear you in your tiny violin. And they're like, this is terrible customer service. He's like, you're not at wit's end. I don't have to treat you like customers. Now I get to treat you like family. Just ask Jana how that goes.
When Wit introduced Suzu and Mori to Jason, Wit was just like, anyway, I'm gonna go get you guys all some snacks or something, and left the room. Jason looks over at them and he's like, I'm so sorry.
It's like, blink 3 times if you need help. I can get you out of there.
And Jason's like, so how are you guys holding up? And Suzu and Mori are like, pretty good so far. We're supposed to have like a game night tonight. And Jason's like, oh no.
Jason's like, look,
I'm
don't
gonna
worry.
get you out of here.
He evens out and gets better once you pass 40.
But yeah, it's so good, because one of my first thoughts back when Wit was like, I'm gonna look after Suzu and Mori, was just like, oh no, is the Whittaker family curse going to strike? Is he going to become meaner to them once they enter the family? And the answer is yes, and I'm so happy. Not that they deserve it, it's just really funny. This episode had like probably some of my favorite Mori moments. This episode is very, very heavily showcasing the fact that Mori and Suzu are in fact still children, despite all of the crimes they've been party to, and all of the insane things they've done, and how smart they are. They are still definitely children of the age, whatever age they are. And Mori's so whiny in this episode. I was thriving. I don't know about you. I was listening to this episode while shelf reading at work, and there were a couple points where I had to just like stifle really loud laughter. Oh, there was one point I've been waiting for so long. I've been waiting for like weeks for you to listen to this episode, because this episode makes me insane. Because of specifically everything with Mori, and one moment with Suzu near the end of the episode, which made me laugh so hard.
Interesting. What happens in the episode, Victoria?
Anyway, in this episode, Mori and Suzu are picking out their courses for the next, like, section.
Semester or whatever, yeah.
I don't think it's a semester, but whatever.
I don't know if they called it that, but that's what it would be.
Yeah. Right? And so... they made their own schedules, basically, without any input from Wit. And Wit was like, oh, I thought I wanted to look at these with you. And Maury's like, oh, no, it's no problem. Like, I want to
Which there's nothing wrong with, to be fair. Like, he has to sign off, but, you know, obviously there's nothing wrong with taking the initiative of picking your courses.
Yeah. And, like, with Maury, there was stuff to be talked about. With Suzu, it was like a kind of like offer,
suggestion. Yes.
Yeah, Suzu is basically like, oh, I decided to get all of my mandatory courses out of the way, which I have also done that before for certain semesters, just so I don't have to worry about, like, so I can have more fun. But Suzu's purpose is I want to get all the mandatory stuff out of the way and then do all more mandatory stuff and just always learn and never have fun. And Wit's like, don't you think that'll be kind of draining? Why don't you try like
Well,
doing?
it kind of sounded like she also, it was like, I don't have a full course load, maybe, where she was like, I'm taking the core requirements and not taking anything else. So I don't know if
Yeah.
it was, I'm taking all of this stuff and I'm using the extra space to pack in more math and science, or if she was like, I'm just taking free periods instead of choosing any
I
electives.
don't
It
know,
was a
it's
bit
kind of
unclear.
vague. But either way, she's taking nothing fun, and Wit's like, well, why don't you try like
She
doing
was taking math and science, Victoria.
something you'll have fun
She didn't
with
take things creative. She took fun
that isn't
courses.
like pure academic kind of stuff. And she's like, oh, I'll think about it. I'll try and look for something I might find interesting. And Maury's just like, okay, so
Well, Wit suggested writing.
Maury already knows everything about computers that can ever be known to any human being. So he's like, I don't need to take like the baby coding intro computers class. I want to take like a course at Campbell College for computer stuff. And if I want to do that, then I need your signature, Mr. Whitaker, because you're my current guardian, basically. And Wit's like, ah, interesting. I'm not signing that. And Maury's like, what do you mean you're not signing it? This episode, like, I don't know, like 75% of this episode is just Maury, like, crying like a depressed cat, like wailing.
Yeah,
And
your
it's
mic
so
your mic will
good.
not survive an accurate representation.
What?
Your mic will not survive an accurate representation or
Yes.
recreation of his vocal performance.
Yes. I was thinking, like, back when we used to make so much fun of Maury, if we heard this episode, we would have lost our minds.
Yeah.
And so Maury goes to the class, which Trey's in this class.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so Trey's in this class and some other kids who we don't really know. They basically have to, as their final project, make like a program. And Maury does literally every single assignment a week before and finishes up the final program that he has to hand in during the intro class on the first day. And Trey's like, oh my gosh, that's so impressive. Can you, like, I don't know, help me with my stuff? And Maury gets
Well, because it's a group project.
It's a group project. And Maury gets put in a group with Trey and a couple other kids. Maury immediately, upon meeting all the other kids, roasts them and predicts Sherlock Holmes style what they would all want to do, and then explains how their ideas are dumb. And then
And they're like, wow, that's amazing.
Everyone's like really upset, and Trey's just like, oh my gosh, he's so cool. Trey is baby. He's very good. And so Trey basically asks Maury if he will help him out making his final project, and Maury's like, oh, I'll think about it. And,
well, it wouldn't be the final because that is, once again, a group project that the four of them would do as a group, a single project.
Yeah. And Maury also hoped that, like, in getting done all the work, he wouldn't really have to go to the class anymore because he already knows everything, and he might be able to get the teacher to argue to Wit that he's ready enough to go to the college class.
And Suzu also points out to him that Wit is all about, like, you know, taking your initiative and not trying to get everyone to do everything else for you. And so maybe the reason he didn't want you to do it is because you wanted him to pull strings and do all this stuff to get him into the course, when what Wit would expect is for you to, like, do the legwork. And he was like, that's a good idea. I'll do all this stuff. All he has to do is sign signature and stuff.
Yeah.
And
we also get a Eugene mention in this episode.
because he was the one teaching the course.
Yeah, and he's very busy at the college, which we've gotten a Eugene mention almost every episode so far.
Third time, I think, in recent months.
And I don't know. What are you thinking? You thinking replacement or
Um,
Eugene gone?
I'm
I'm
thinking
thinking replacement at this point.
I'm thinking replacement, and all of these comments are just meant to buy time while that
Yeah,
process is underway.
which I'm glad, actually. Even though it's going to be very bittersweet, I do think that is the right choice from like a storytelling
Yes, if they were going to write
perspective,
him off,
especially
I
since
don't think
Buck
they
is
wouldn't
a
be
very
doing
prominent character
doing
right
this at
now.
this point. They're like, he's been so busy at the college, and they're like, tragically, he was so busy at the college, he fell asleep while working in the chemistry lab, and he exploded.
Yeah, but like every single time they mention him, they're like, "We miss Eugene so much. He's so busy at the college. He's the best person,"
Yes.
which like could be read as just everyone missing Will, or could be read as just like kind of the writers being like, "Hey, Eugene isn't gone."
Yeah, I think it's column A, column B. I mean,
Yeah, I think it's
I
both.
don't think it's meant to be like a memo to the fans telling them, hey, Eugene isn't gone, he's coming back. I mean,
Yeah.
there may be an aspect of that. I think it's meant to just narratively justify we're not seeing Eugene right now,
No, yeah, I think it's all
he
of
is
those
still in
things.
town, and we're acknowledging that, and he will return. Yeah.
Yeah. Eugene's Return is the name of the next album. Eugene's Return 2. Um, meanwhile, on Suzu's side of things, she is joining the newspaper they have at the school.
The Odyssey Owl,
And
it's called. Yeah,
is it still the Odyssey Owl? Okay. It's like always been
it has. Yeah.
the Odyssey Owl. Um,
It must be
so
confusing for them with the sports team and whatnot.
I never even thought about that. I never even thought about the fact that the sports team
It's
is
the
called the
Owls.
Owls,
Yeah.
and their school newspaper has literally always, for like dozens upon dozens of albums, been called
I mean, I
the
never thought
Owls.
about the confusion before. I think it's album 51, the first time that we hear mention of the sports team, the
Yeah.
Odyssey Owls, and you hear that and you're like, "Oh, obviously it's a reference to the newspaper."
Whoa.
I'd never really thought until now about how confusing that must be sometimes. I mean, at
The
least one of
Odyssey
them.
Owl writes about the Odyssey Owls who had a missing Odyssey Owl that they had to
Yes,
find.
the fact that one of them is basically always pluralized and the other is not is probably the only thing saving mass confusion in the distinction.
Yeah. The
Anyways,
only thing stopping us from all out chaos.
exactly, is a single
Um,
S.
So Zoe is basically mentoring Suzu at
And
the
we
paper.
got Andy, what's his face, back, who
We
is the
have
editor.
we have a little guy who
We get to properly meet him since he, stole the editorship from Zoe in the Olivia
oh,
Zoe
okay, I was
debacle.
trying to remember who this guy was.
Yeah, he was the one who
Um
was up against Zoe, and then Olivia leaked the story to Andy, and then Miss
mhm.
Adelaide gave the role to him, and now we get to see him actually in the position, Zoe working under him.
We didn't hear him ever talk before though, did we?
I think we did. I could be wrong. When I went to make a
Anyway,
character playlist for him, I couldn't remember his last name. I want to say it's something short, like 4 letters, and it starts with an R. And I tried to scan back through the episode because I know that they said it in here, but I couldn't find it quickly, immediately. And it's not on the wiki yet because, or he doesn't show up in either episode in the descriptions or in the characters because, they're not as fleshed out for recent stuff. For lots of like recent years of episodes. So it's the older ones that get like really thorough material.
so this little guy kind of talks like a old newsy kind of person, except for he's like 11.
He's very passionate about his
Uh,
exposés and all that stuff in
yeah.
newspapering.
He's like, Suzu, darling, sweetheart, you gotta write this. You gotta get the.
Exactly
It's
what he
really
sounded
funny.
like.
Um, honestly, good for this guy. I'm good for him. He has something he's real passionate about and kind of weird about, but I'm glad he has stuff he likes. Good for him. Um, so Zoe is writing on her side, a very time sensitive article. She finishes it. She mentors Suzu a lot, helps her with a lot of things, gives her a bunch of like resources. Um, Suzu kind of struggles a little bit, asks Mori for help. He says no, help me instead, which is big sibling energy. um, and
Yeah, he's like, help me with this. And she's like, here you go, now help me with this. And he's like, no. And leaves.
And then he walked away. It was really funny.
Family.
Family. So Suzu's article is very, very good. And Suzu's article is going to replace the slot that Zoe's article was going to go in.
Mm-hmm.
And Zoe's upset, not like a little bit upset because her article is getting pushed back.
It's not a selfish thing. It's like
because like her article was apparently about something like really important, and Suzu's wasn't time sensitive.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if it's necessarily like in an urgent way, like this is important, but it's probably more likely time sensitive in a way where it's just not relevant by the next week.
Yeah,
There's
whereas
no
Suzu still would have been time relevant.
Yeah.
So like it's kind of scummy that hers was going to get pushed back, but
and it's funny because it was like Zoe was like, you know, really like, what do you like? You have to do this.
Also, they never said what the topic was. I kept on waiting for them to say what like Zoe's article was about, and they never said.
You know, that was a reaction, and then later we hear like, oh, they printed Zoe's instead, and I'm like, it's weird because in a different episode, I feel like this would imply that Zoe had like done something underhanded to get them like swapped out or something. But that would make no sense in this episode, and then obviously that's not what happened.
Yeah.
But that's what it sounded like at first.
Yeah,
you know, it made it seem like Zoe had done something
under other circumstances. And even though I was cheering on Suzu to like do a good job and stuff and have her work appreciated, the second Zoe was like, "No, this actually needs to go out first for like legitimate reasons," I was like, "Oh, yeah, print hers first." And then when I heard hers was printed first, I was like, good, Suzu's can be printed next week. It's fine. Suzu was a little bummed. I will get back into that stuff later. Meanwhile, Mori is helping Trey with his website. Wit once again says, Mori, no, you're not allowed going into the college course. Yeah. Just do your thing. And Mori, basically after helping Trey, and it's not like he does all the work for Trey, which I did wonder if that would happen. Trey definitely works super hard. And Trey learns how to do all these things. He's so proud of himself. It's very adorable.
I was to say, I'm glad that, if I remember interpreting things correctly, that this like intro to coding class is like a general requirement for everyone.
Yeah, it is.
Which I like, because obviously, you know, that education need, like, I never had, like, I mean, obviously there was, like, computer classes when I was young where it's like, this is a class that everyone takes.
As mandatory in my master's, and it was so hard.
I did coding as an elective in my bachelor's degree, but, like, in high school and stuff like that, there was no, like, mandatory class on coding, even though, you know, there's obviously classes that involve like using computers and the internet and stuff like that, and typing when you're young, but nothing on like coding that was mandatory for everyone. Obviously that is something that should be the case now these days, and so I'm glad that we're seeing that reflected.
So Trey gets really excited when he finishes his program. He wants to show it to Mori first, which is really adorable. But Mori's in a bad mood because he just got shut down again by Wit, and they got in a fight because it's the album of Angry Wit. That's the invisible subtitle for...
Also, Wit kept on saying he had to do it because there's value in the process, which is the title of the episode.
Yeah. And it's basically like Wit saying, I know you are smart enough to do the other one, but it's good to start at the basics again because it's good to get a refresher and make sure you understand all the core concepts. And even if you don't, like you do, and all of it's really easy for you, there are people like Trey who you can help. And all
There's
the other people in your
the
class.
socialization aspect, which isn't what my first thought would be when you're talking about value in the process. But I
Yeah,
think
and also Maury
that's
has like no friends
that's
his
the
age.
more
He just has
relevant
Emily, who's
for Maury
basically his indentured
specifically.
servant.
Yes, it is the more relevant part is the socialization with peers, which he lacks completely.
My little cringe fail son.
Uh-huh.
Anyway,
Apart from Emily and
so
Suzu, Maury's only other
and Cooper.
friend is Cooper, who's Trey's
Yeah.
older brother.
He's just collecting friends. And then Matthew is invisible. We
Yeah.
can't find him.
I just thought it was weird
so-
that it wasn't brought up that he's like, I have this squad of people that also includes your older brother, Trey.
No one can know about
Your
the
your
secret squad
competent
because
brother.
they don't have a good name picked out yet.
Yeah.
So Trey goes to show it to Maury. Maury kind of clicks through it, being a jerk. And he's just like, oh, you're predictable too. Like, you did this and you have like clouds and a lightning bolt because it's for your mom. Because she's a meteorologist.
And you feel
And-
inadequate and you suck. And
Yeah.
this is just we're just having a real string of everyone beating down on Trey very hard.
Yeah.
That Victoria's leading the charge.
No, I said that last time because I'd already listened to this episode. Not because I think Trey's dumb, but because I had a bias from listening to this. I love Trey. He's great. So when I said everyone picking on Trey, I kind of meant Maury. So then we have him being like, oh, and it's going to have a message that pops up that says like, I love you, Mom, or something. And then he clicks on it and it's like, thank you for helping me, Maury.
And he was frothing at the mouth as he was describing things as they were
like
happening.
his soul got sucked out when he saw it, and he was like, oh, Trey, I'm so sorry. Trey's crying, and I was like, how dare you do this to him? He's such a sweet bean. How dare you? It was, I felt so bad for him.
It was
And
literally
Trey was
2
like-
episodes ago. Renee renewed my boy's just getting hammered this album.
It's the album of wit anger, penny anger, and just bullying my son Trey.
Betray.
Betrayed. So Trey, which I'm pretty sure I've had a moment like this before. I was like, no, it's fine. And you can tell he's trying not to cry, and then he walks away, and I was like, no. And Maury's like, I don't know how to fix this. I'm bad at human interaction. And so he goes to like talk to everyone again. Talks with Wit again about some of this stuff we already said about like getting along with others and stuff. He apologizes to Trey, and Trey basically suggests in front of the teacher that everyone in the original group work on a group project together, and they hand it in as a group instead of doing their own little individual ones, as kind of like a way to show he's forgiven, like, him. And it's nice. I like their friendship. I'm excited to see where it goes. I like that Maury and Suzu look like they're becoming friends with, like, both Trey and Cooper instead of one over the other. I think it'd be really funny if Maury was closer with Trey and Suzu was closer with Cooper, just because I don't know why. Anyway,
Okay.
and then we go back to Suzu, and we have my favorite moment in the episode. It brought me such joy when Zoe comes in, like, very dour, and she's like, Suzu, we couldn't print your article, and Suzu's kind of bummed, and she's like, why? You guys said it was so well written. And so he's like, yeah, and we read it, we like scanned it through a plagiary checker. And Suzu's like, I don't know what plagiarism is. And Zoe's like, it's like stealing. And Suzu was like, no, I've stolen again. I didn't mean to. I was laughing so hard. I was like, even the moment she doesn't mean to steal, she can't help
I was
subconsciously
curious about why
steal.
this was your favorite part of the episode, like what
It's
the
because
reason would be.
daily I think about the time where I quoted over the
I
garden
see.
wall, and I'm like, we stole Suzu. We didn't
See,
steal
I felt
Suzu.
bad
She's a
because
dog.
she felt like
She was
not
like, I didn't want to steal anymore, but I can't stop stealing.
like her, because yeah, obviously she's not just like someone who's stolen a lot of stuff. Like she's a kleptomaniac.
Yeah.
It's compulsive for her, and she sounded so sad. Like
Yeah.
I thought, I've been working, and I thought that I was past this, and now I've stolen in a way
Well,
that
now
I
you're
didn't
making
even
me feel
realize.
bad for laughing at it.
That's why I was like, oh, that is sad that she was like, oh, like almost like trauma the way she sounded when she said it.
It
Like,
made me think of moments where like characters are trying to be mean or something like that, but just every single thing they do leads to everyone just liking them more.
uh-huh.
And but
Like I
it's
can't
Suzu,
escape this. Yeah.
and every time she steals, and then she's like, no, I'm not gonna steal anymore, and then she somehow steals anyway, and she's like, I don't even know how that happened, which I can't. Which I didn't really do research on what happens next. Like laws about
I did.
plagiarization. Okay, I'm glad because I forgot to. So tell
Um,
me all about plagiary.
um, not a word still.
Tell me all about the plagiarization.
The plague, the
Tell me
plague.
about the plague.
Also, what was the other thing I was gonna say just now? Suzu says that where she was like, "Oh no, I didn't want to do this." Oh yeah, that the way that Zoe describes the concept of plagiarism, she describes it about in like, the ownership of ideas and its theft of intellectual property, and I was like,
Yeah,
"That's
I was just like 2 times in a row.
yeah, weird, weird back to back talking about IP theft." Um,
Odyssey loves talking about IP theft.
okay, so coming
It's
down.
like when you finally learn a new word and you just
Uh-huh.
want to like put it into everything you talk about.
So, coming down to the end of my notes for the episode. So, Suzu said that she wasn't aware that plagiarism is a thing. She was like, in my culture, we don't view ideas that way. And that really threw me because I was like, that doesn't.
Also, how long has. I guess they just recently came to the US.
Yes.
Okay.
That really surprised me and confused. I was like,
Same.
that doesn't sound right. I've never heard of anything like that. So I looked it up, and sure enough, it is a very common and pervasive idea that plagiarism is not considered transgressive in Japan or
Huh.
in larger East Asia, but specifically Japan.
Tell Studio Ghibli that. They flag like every single thing on YouTube.
So, well, I think there's a difference between plagiarism and re-uploading.
No, I mean like whenever
Material.
anyone makes like a review or
I see.
something like that, it gets
anyways.
flagged. But that could be also because they're partially owned by Disney. I don't know.
I think Disney probably has a lot to do with it. So if you Google it, you'll see that this generalization seems to mostly stem from a single paper that was written in 2006. Because when you Google it, you'll see specifically a lot of like recent research articles that are investigating like, is this true? Like, this is a common idea that in Japan people don't.
Oh, is it like a myth?
Well, so there was this paper that did a study, a research study in 2006, and it purported that people don't in Japan, that students don't have a concept of plagiarism, or that it's like you might be aware of the concept, but it's not really considered wrong, that it's fairly commonplace. And so when you Google it, you'll see a lot of more recent studies that you can see from the titles are like directly addressing like, we did further research to see, is this true or not? It seems at a glance at abstracts that the further reset search confirms like the original study like was kind of flawed in the way that it like asked the questions like in a cultural and translation kind of way. Like the questions were leading in a way that wasn't necessarily representing like how the conclusion was worded. However, there is an actual basis to the idea that Japanese students do have an understanding of plagiarism. They're not completely ambivalent towards the concept, but it's still not necessarily viewed the same way or with the same weight that it has in Western academia.
That
So
is very interesting.
I was like, this is very surprising to me. I've never heard of this before.
I never heard of it either.
Regardless of how true it turned out to be, Suzu said that, and I was like, what? Like, where did that come
Yeah.
from? And I Googled it and was like, oh, this is a thing. Whether or
It's one of
not
those things where I was like, I have to look this up, but at the same time, it's such like a crazy
it
thing for me
sounded
to
so
hear
weird to me.
that it must be true.
I was like, there. I feel like it's a weird thing to make up if there isn't
Yeah,
some basis to it,
exactly.
which is why I looked it up and I was like, oh yeah, just Googled
It
like,
didn't, like, I was thinking, this has to be true because if it's just something you made up, one, that's like a crazy thing to make
well,
up, and
yeah,
two,
I
that
was
almost
like,
feels like an insulting thing
yeah, I
to
was
make
like,
up
this
if it's not
can't be
true.
real because I would have heard about this, right? But it's so
Yeah,
weird. So I
same.
just Googled like plagiarism not in Japan question mark or something like that and saw all this stuff come up that was like specifically all that. And I was like, okay, this is one of those things where it's like, oh, here's a whole this whole thing that you never knew existed.
Yeah,
Um,
I guess they're still in like middle school, right?
yeah.
Because I guess citing and plagiarism doesn't become like it's still a thing for sure,
Uh huh.
but it's not like as big a thing until you get to high school
Yeah.
onwards.
Um, so so regardless of whether or not it is true or how true it is, the idea itself that plagiarism is not an idea or as much of an idea of a severely bad thing in Japan as it is in Western countries, where it is like you will be expelled if you plagiarize once intentionally, like in any institution, you are gone. It is very harsh.
I was
So
always so scared of
yeah, same.
accidental like plagiarism whenever
Exactly.
I literally submitted anything. I was just like, what if I plagiarize and I don't realize I
Exactly. Yeah.
plagiarized? So I would do so many citations. Every now and then I would get a note. It's like, you don't need a citation there. And then I'm like, but if I didn't, what
But
would you have done?
the thing that always gets me, is, especially for scientific stuff, is you don't need to cite stuff that is common knowledge.
Yeah.
But when you're working in a specific field, that's always the question, right? Is like, okay, what is common knowledge? I'll be like writing a paper, and it's like, okay, do I need? I'm if I have a sentence that's like, people have stomachs. Stomachs digest food. Is that common enough knowledge, or do I need to cite a source for that? It's like,
For me,
where
with
do you
like,
draw the line on telling?
with like book knowledge
Mm-hmm.
for like my English major stuff, if I said like, I don't know, like a random sentence or a reference to a book, I'd be like, do I need to cite the whole book because this is just a general thing in the
Uh
book?
huh.
Or am I okay if I don't cite anything? And the kind of like crappy thing that happens with lots of books when you're talking about certain things is you either have to cite like a billion different individual pages or
Mm-hmm.
you're like, I'm just going to cite the whole book, which is, it's kind of nice citing DVDs and movies and stuff, which I've done before because like you don't have to put timestamps or anything like that. So like that's really convenient. Whereas like you have to put page numbers and stuff with books.
Yeah, it's funny when you're doing like writing where something is like in fiction and trying to figure out where you draw that line, because I've definitely had stuff before where I'm like, people have DNA. Do I do I need to find a source for this, or can I just assume that's a thing people know? Because then on the other side of it, right, I don't want to write this super hyper specific thing and be like, this is something people know, right? Where it's like you're
I've done
so
that
deep
before. I've
into a
written like
field of
things I thought
study.
were like generalized or something, and I've gotten notes saying like you need a source on this, and I'm like,
Because there were not
heck.
just a couple months ago, there was an XKCD comic as like two geologists talking to each other, and they're like, "Do you ever find it crazy that like most people can only name the elemental structure of one or two quartzes?" And they're like, "Yeah, I mean, most of them could only do like feldspar at best." And the caption is like, people specialists wildly overestimating the knowledge of the general public in their field. And I was like, yeah, when it comes to
Feldspar is
citations,
the
this is,
name of one of the magi who gave a gift to Jesus, right?
oh, yeah, yeah.
Is it actually? That
No, it's
sounds like one of
Melchior,
them.
Caspar. Caspar is
Yeah,
the same.
that's it.
Um, anyways, so uh, the final thing I said about this is, I saw a couple different academic papers researching with wider studies with better study design to investigate this. But I saw on Turnitin, which is of course a very huge and prominent site
Yeah, cite your sources, Dev. Don't plagiarize.
for academic paper submission that does, word matching detection for plagiarism and stuff. Turnitin has a page on their site. I'll put the link in the description. And it is talking about cultural differences in plagiarism. And it talks about like a couple different philosophical paradigms in East Asia that contribute to different viewpoints on attribution of work.
Yeah, like is when Suzu said that, one of my other thoughts was just like that does make sense. Like that would be a thing for
And that's
different
the first
cultures.
specific
Like
philosophy
big
that's brought up
ideologies when it comes to certain
is like
cultures.
a collectivist idea philosophy is something that's more common because a lot of it comes from like Confucianism and stuff like that,
Mm.
and the way that ideas are viewed like as common building blocks towards society. And there's a couple other things that have to do with like the idea, like how teaching in terms of like memorizing material word for word versus rewording and understanding, like different cultural aspects that all work together to contribute to this different view on the concept of plagiarism. So yeah, I'll put that link in the description because it's a good kind of summary of that topic.
I never thought I'd talk about plagiarism this much after being done school in a conversation.
So other notes. So yeah, top of the episode. This is the first time we're seeing Wit and the Rydals interacting since the Rydal revelation. Obviously, they mentioned him.
Which is so sad.
They mentioned Wit a bunch in the episode where they were trying to make good with Olivia.
Who wrote this episode again?
Phil.
Phil. Thank you, Phil.
Eugene gets mentioned again. He's very busy. I know his work's important. I really felt for Maury at the beginning of this episode where he's like, I know, like, don't make me do the basic course. I know this so well. It's going to be like so boring and pointless. Like, let me actually learn something interesting and relevant. And then he's sitting in the lecture and it's like a boring, drawling teacher who's like, programs are
He's
like,
basically doing an impersonation of that one actor. I don't remember his name. The one with like the really, really monotone voice. He's in The Mask. Let me find him.
anyway, so yeah, I was like, I get it. When you are like so familiar with something and then you have to learn about it in school in this embarrassingly rudimentary way, and you have to plod through the motions and you can't skip it even though you know it. I remember in grade 5 in music class and asking the
Oh
teacher
yeah,
in the middle of
definitely me
class
in music class too.
if, because I had heard from my mom that some of her other students had done this previously, that students who, like me at that point, what I would have been 10 at that point, so I had like 7 years of music theory already that I had taken, and now we're learning like this is a treble clef, or even like even
Ben
more
Stein.
rudimentary than that. Sorry?
Ben Stein.
I see. And I'd heard that some other students who are like, oh yeah, like I already have, I'm already up to like grade 4 Royal Conservatory in music theory, and they'd been allowed to like, sit in the hallway during like just basic one, like sub 101 level in school music theory, so that they could work on like their external music theory homework on like the advanced homework that they're doing for music classes during that time. And so I asked that of the teacher, and he was like, "What do you think?" And I was like, "Yes," because I had extremely underdeveloped skills of understanding people's intentions emotionally and reading them. And so I was like, I don't know. I asked you, why are you telling me to answer the question? So I was like, yes. And he was like, no. I was like, okay. Like, I only asked because I'd heard this was a precedent at this school. The other people had done like a grade or two above me. But yeah, I understand, it's happened in a couple different classes before, but I was like, probably the best example is when you're in school and you have to do basic music theory, when Victoria and I had
Yeah.
both taken piano since we
I
were
was
three
thinking,
or
I
four
can't think
years
of
old.
like any time where I'm like definitively like I know more than you. Except for yeah, music. I was like that. I remember there's this one time it haunts me still in like grade 5 or something like that. We had like a worksheet quiz thing, and it was a bunch of notes on like the
Like,
staff,
can you
and
tell
we
the
had to
difference
like
between a
name all
quarter
of
note
them.
and a half note? This is the
And
entire test.
I we it was like naming the letter names in the notes, and I did it so fast I got 2 wrong, and it haunts me to this day. I still think about that constantly. It makes me so mad
But
because
yeah,
I
it's like,
tried to be done it within the span of like a single minute
yeah,
and be the first one to hand it in. So I
because at
didn't
that
like do it carefully.
that's like the first grade where we had any kind of like music class in school. But at that point, we could both like practically speak Italian with like the amount of like uh, music terminology that we knew. Like, we'd been literally years and years, and we'd already would have written several theory exams at that point and stuff like that. So it's like we're so far beyond this. So I was like,
Yeah,
that's
like
a
I said, the best example picture wise is just the Ron Swanson shopping I know more than you
it's like, yeah,
picture.
I really felt for Maury when it's like he is like insanely good at this, and they're literally talking about programs where he's like, this is a computer, it can connect to something called the internet, this is a keyboard, it has keys, and when you press them the alphabet happens. And
When you press key, alphabet
I
happens.
was like, oh man, like, I get it. I get why Wit said this, because value in the process, obviously, we said ultimately for Maury, I think it came down more to socialization, but even in
Mm-hmm.
general, I would use that phrase to describe like the fact that Maury learned all of this stuff in a very non-traditional environment, like he learned it on his own and stuff. And so there is value in going through the traditional process to learn the basic building blocks properly and building up a solid foundation of your knowledge for a discipline, because you
It's like
weren't.
the difference between being self-taught and professionally taught.
Yeah, it's important to, like, if you're self-taught and you know all this stuff, it's important to still understand, like, in the normal pedagogical field, like, what are the core concepts, because like, in addition to the auxiliary value of the process itself and the road of it all, the social cooperation, like, that's all there. But learning stuff the proper way from the building base helps you have a better core understanding of the higher stuff, that there could be these little things that you skipped over because you learned it yourself, and you learned so far ahead in these specific areas of hacking and stuff that you miss these kinds of things where it's like, yeah, I guess I know that, but I didn't think about it this way. It reframes it. It's that whole idea of, you need to understand the rules before you can break them.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about that in season 3 of Free, and I can't remember the word, but there's like a specific name for it in Japanese, that concept that goes back to like
I don't
historical
remember.
fighting, where it's
That's
like,
like what the one guy tells Haru, right?
yeah, whereas
Yeah.
like you need to understand these principles before you can transcend them. It's the same thing as, when I was coming back to music theory, the first time I really addressed that was like studying a harmony class. And, there are rules about how you have to write music in that class. And
There's
there's a
ways.
couple of rules.
There's something called composing, and the way music sounds good is by understanding how music
And
works.
it's just like so many rules. It's like a logic puzzle of how to avoid your parallel fourths and fifths and
One of
octaves.
the rules
And
is sometimes you got to make music sound bad to make it sound good and resolve it. You can't leave something unresolved.
but I mean, there are these rules that are extremely specific about how intervals can move between each other from note to note. And obviously, if you look at any classical music even, you're like, okay, well, this is being broken all the time in this piece. Like,
They're the ones who made the rules.
Bach is the king of counterpoint. There's a parallel octave. I see it right there. Why does he get to break the rules, but I have to follow
Because he's
him?
Bach.
And it's like, because he understands the rules until you reach the point where you have a holistic understanding of everything, and then you can transcend them. I use the same comparison. Obviously, I don't
Bach
want...
was basically the Abraham of music.
Of Western music, at least,
he
yeah.
he had his little own empire of like, my son also become composer.
Oh yeah, you're correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Father J.S. Bach had many sons. It's more touchy in how you would describe that in terms of like Mosaic law and the way that Jesus changed our perception of the law in the New Testament. To talk about it in a way that's theologically accurate and doesn't just be like, oh, well, the Old Testament doesn't matter now, because that's how a lot of people describe it. Like, well, the law's done with, we don't need it anymore, which is a very reductionist and anti-Semitic and way, but also like not what Jesus describes. But the point is, he came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. But that also involves a lot of ways that, okay, these laws were here for very specific reasons, some of them hygienic, some of them moral, and those laws specifically don't apply anymore like to Christians, and Jesus talks about this in a number of specific examples. And like, food laws, what you can eat, and Paul or Peter, whoever it was, having the dream, and is like, all of this is food for you now. The verse that they talk about in the Twilight Zone, like, all these things are lawful for me, but I will
But not all of them are good for me.
But yeah, exactly. But I won't let anything make me a slave. Where it's like, okay, now we have a more holistic understanding of the law. What is the intent, the heart, the spirit behind the law? We can gain a more full understanding, which comes back to
it's that thing you talked about before.
Comes back to shoplifting and stealing from the rich to give to the poor. The only other thing that I have in my notes is, like you said, Maury in this episode, he really lays it on heavy with the whole like Sherlock Moriarty thing, which is fitting, like it specifically in the deductive way, where it's like, I see from the scuff on your shoes and the dirt under your the pinky nail and stuff like that, which is only fitting to a degree, given that we sometimes forget he's literally named after Moriarty. So
I love him so much. Maury was like a little brat in this episode, and I want more of that.
And then I did say in here, like, maybe I was mistaken previously in my assessment that the show is not trying to give us the overall impression that Trey is depressingly average compared to the rest of his family. I will cede that point to Victoria. Mm-hmm. It makes a lot more sense now, knowing that you'd already listened to this episode when you were talking about all that, because they've really just been blasting him.
And anyways, I started blast.
Yeah, so that is all my notes on the episode. I really liked it.
I'm glad that they're getting friends their own age through unmalicious means of any way.
This was the episode that we thought was going to be Olivia, based on the title.
Yes.
Obviously, you've already heard the other two episodes, so you already know what's what.
The rest of the album.
So we still have Olivia episode. We still have Buck and Jules, because
yes,
Game Night is the one that was not in the initial description.
Mm-hmm. Which one do you think is which?
I don't... Tough Call is the next episode, I think. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
I don't remember the finale's title.
I can check.
But
which one do you think is the next one? Buck and Jules or Olivia?
Just because one is a finale, I would assume that one is probably Buck and Jules.
The album is called Buckle Up.
Yes.
So Buck's name.
Yes.
King of My Heart is the name of the finale.
Okay, that's probably Olivia. Unless it's Jules talking about Buck. Or it's Jay talking about Elvis.
I wish it was Jay talking. I'll give you this one spoiler. It's unfortunately, it pains me so much to say, not Jay talking about Elvis.
Yeah,
but it
okay.
should be.
But she could be bluffing us, folks. She's very
I
well known to
could
do
be.
that.
That is one of my character traits. It is written down.
That's like your top 3 like Sims character trait bubbles.
What? Being a little trickster?
Yeah, you've never like just done a single bluff on me before. I would say you've never told me the truth about anything. If you tell me something that is the truth, it's because you're probably not even double bluffing. It's at least a quadruple bluff.
Yeah.
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 You never do anything that is like below a double bluff. It's always at least double, triple, quadruple, or more layers.
Yeah. Why do people always assume I'm always the killer and no one trusts me in murder mystery games? I don't understand why. How could they do this to me? The funniest part is I'm usually not the killer and I always get kicked out of the game immediately.
It was a good episode.
It was a really good episode.
I'm really glad that we got to see Mori
5 stars.
Mori and Suzu be characters without it being relating to Olivia and the past and stuff. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I think that the concept of in learning and in general, like, yes, there's value in the process of like going through it the proper way and learning the basic building blocks to build a solid foundation to your understanding on a topic is important, but also, as it was more so for Mori, like this socialization and doing it with kids your own age and not being thrown into a university level, like a 4th year course, which is what he was trying to get into, because he
would have been very isolated doing that.
He would have been a Nicholas Adamsworth situation.
He would have been Nicholas, which would make him go back to being evil.
If he was Nicholas, but he was evil from the get-go, he Richarded himself.
He Richard Maxwelled himself. I think it would have been interesting, though, because I feel like Eugene would have maybe said the same thing to him, because Eugene also was put like in lots of scenarios a lot sooner than he should have been, which made him very like
messed
awkward
up
socially and messed up on a bunch of levels. So
yeah,
I think he would have been very Eugened if he did that. So
I mean, I definitely sided with Wit. I probably would have
with angry dad.
I probably would have explained my reasoning more than Wit
don't do that when he's dad. He only does that when he's not family.
And also for narrative reasons.
When you become Wit's family, all of your privileges get revoked.
I'm glad that we got to see Andy as the editor of the Owl, and we got to see like Zoe underneath him working. I learned something very interesting about cultural perceptions on like ownership of ideas and plagiarism.
Every time Andy talked, I just like visually pictured
a very
him
short guy with like the hat or the paper out of it, and he's like got a trench coat on.
One of the main characters from the Owl House, and I don't know why, like this character named Gus, who's like very good character. Go watch the Owl House. The last episode is going to come out in I don't know when, they haven't announced it, but there's only 1 episode left. Everyone go watch it.
Yeah, Trey was adorable just in the way he was just like fawning over Moria, and the way Suzu was playing it up. She was like, I heard you had a very wonderful computer class with my brother today.
There were so many good sibling moments in this episode.
Yeah, it was just nice to see them get to be like characters without it being about their relation to Olivia.
It was nice to see them
Emily.
get to be normal Asterix kids for like the first time ever.
Yeah. So
we didn't steal Suzu, she's adopted.
I want
to steal. I still think that's one of the funniest things I've said on the podcast. But it's a reference and a reference, so unless you've seen Over the Garden Wall, you won't get it.
Okay, it's your
What do
rating
you?
first for this one.
Five. Excellent, amazing on every front. I loved it. Please be nice to Trey. He deserves the world.
I'm also gonna give it a 5. I really enjoyed
Yeah.
the characterization. I liked the theme. I learned something new. I enjoyed seeing characters interact that we haven't got to see before.
I
Um,
missed Mori and Suzu so much. I a little before this album came out, just like in anticipation, I actually re-listened to a lot of the more recent episodes with them. So like mainly the Emily Cooper stuff, like post uh, wit adoption
uh-huh.
content.
Isn't there only like 2 episodes with them
Yes,
since? Yeah.
yes. But I also did listen to a couple old Mori Suzu episodes too.
Yeah, I'm glad that we finally got to see them with Wit as their guardian
Domesticated. They've been
because
evil
it
domesticated,
was
which is my favorite kind of villain like redemption
we'd
thing.
gone on so long without that I was worried that had just swept it under the rug, and they were like, from a narrative point, we feel like it'll be weird to show it like
Yeah.
narratively, and so we're just gonna kind of like
I did
forget
definitely start getting
forget that
worried that
that's
we were never going to get to see like them
exactly.
interact or
I was worried that
anything.
they were kind of trying to make us forget that they committed to that in the episode.
But they didn't. They didn't forget.
Yeah,
They did it for us.
and it and putting that back on the table reopens all those delightful possibilities of where else
The
and what else
fact
can
that
happen with that.
Wit, Connie, and Eugene are all parents now, and Wit is of
Of current
teenagers,
parents, yeah.
current parents of teenagers, is so good. It's so good. They swap kids for one day,
We
and
literally had the episode too where Buck and Jules like interacted with, well, at least Buck directly interacted with Mori and
yeah.
Suzu. So
Can you
it's
imagine if they swapped kids for one day, or all four of them hung out, and like Connie gets stuck with Maury and Suzu? She's terrified. Buck or Jules gets,
it would have
or
to
I
be
guess
Buck with
Buck
Wit and
gets
Jules with
stooled with
Eugene.
stuck with Wit, and he's like, "I didn't realize you were so mean, Mr. Whitaker." And he's like, "Only when I'm being family." And then
Family
Jules is
swap.
just hanging
Family
out
swap.
with Eugene, and they're the only ones that have a good time.
That's the logical outcome. Yeah.
Yeah. They
Connie will have
catch so
locked
many
herself in a
fish.
closet by the end of the day.
Yeah. Eugene taught Jules how to like mix her own music on all these new ways she didn't know how
Uh-huh.
to, and she's like, "This is so interesting." And Buck's also locked in the same closet as Connie because it was, I don't know, they were all in the
They
same
also
building. I don't know.
both play like wait, Jules doesn't play guitar, does she? It's just Buck.
Uh I think so, yeah.
Because I was gonna say
Buck was taught how to play guitar by
by
Eugene.
Eugene, yeah. Because I was gonna
Eugene
say
can teach Jules how to play guitar. That'd be so
I was
wholesome.
in my head. I was thinking Jules was the one playing the guitar, and I was like, they both, play like strummed string instruments, and he could like
No,
teach her
I think it'd be adorable if
ways to like
Eugene
adjust
taught
the acoustics of her sound and
Jules
stuff.
how to play guitar, but then again, that would have been more of like a Will Shona
Uh huh.
thing because they're friends, but yeah. Anyway, what's next?
Anyways,
Album's finishing.
yes, great episode. Next time, it's the end of the album,
Yeah.
so
Next two episodes,
tough
whatever
call,
the other
King of
one
My
was,
Heart,
and King of My Heart.
yeah, and then album
And then
review,
album
and
review.
that's it. Good album.
Good album so far.
So, until then, thank you for joining us on our side of YouTube. I've been Devin Francis, also known as Dr. Blackguard.
And I hungry. I want to go eat.
Go eat food. Go eat food.
You go
food
eat
good.
food too.
We both go eat food.
We both go eat food, but separate.
Yes. Separate, together. Goodbye.
Okay, bye.